Thank you for joining me for what I'm more or less calling my story/spoiler run through Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. This is your warning that from this point forward, this video and all of the videos in this series are full of spoilers and speculation for the complete story in Rebirth, so everything we're given in-game. It will be looking at ideas and elements from Remake, as well as the original Final Fantasy VII, start to finish, so including beyond where we are in the story, the whole story start to finish of OG7. It will be incorporating ideas and plot elements from the books, On the Way to a Smile, The Kids Are All Right, Tale of Two Pasts. It will probably come up once or twice discussing Advent Children, the movie, and I will give you fair warning, it is such a convoluted story, and going back through it for how many times I've watched other people play, I've watched my play, I've recorded these videos, as many times as I've gone through it, there's always new ideas and thoughts that I have while doing stuff, so you'll see little interruptions occasionally throughout the video, like this! And those are just, during the editing process, something I forgot to mention. I came in and thought of it, and so added it in after fact. So if those are annoying, sorry, but it is what it is. So I want these to generate discussion. I want to hear your thoughts, so please join me in the comments. Tell me things that maybe I missed. If you see something you missed, let me know. If you think I'm wrong about something, please. If you think I'm going off into crazy town, if you think I'm on the right track, great, let's talk about it. Maybe discussion will raise some more ideas. Anyway, without further ado, thank you for joining me. I love this game. Hopefully you do too, so let's get into it. Okay, I think it's that time. This is the final wrap-up of my thoughts and all of my predictions that I can think of right now. I've been collecting post-it notes and thoughts and revising those thoughts and God knows what else throughout this playthrough, and really starting with my very first playthrough and watching everybody in the meantime right up until literally last night as I was collecting more thoughts. I still had more stuff to write down. Some of the theories and comments and predictions that I'm going to go over next are probably going to run counter to stuff I may have said during the videos in this series that led up to it. My thoughts have evolved as I've gone through this process, and you know, there's no way I could have started that video series thinking and knowing everything that I know and think now, and dear God, I'm not going back and starting it all over again. So there should be plenty of chapter markers in the video, so feel free to watch some, come back later, watch another section, pick up where you left off. By all means, please share this with any other Rebirth fans you know. I would love engagement and comments and questions and whatever I can get, because to me, half the fun of this game is being able to talk about it with people, and the people who are still playing the game, you can't talk about this advanced stuff with, and the people who have already finished the game, it's sometimes kind of hard to find someone new to talk with about it that either you haven't already argued things about with, or that doesn't already share your thoughts on it. So I'm all about new engagement here. I want to start this off by discussing what I think we have in this universe and the story that we're being given. And I say universe to mean the encompassing FF7 story as a whole. So all of the alternate worlds, the original story, the everything. I'm saying universe to encompass the whole thing. I think that in this universe of FF7, the OG7 storyline was originally the only one. We know that from Sephiroth's description at least, and in this I think he's a reliable enough narrator, that the other worlds are created when the boundaries of fate are breached. And that fate implies an original sequence of events, an original story being told. So OG7. I think that that was its own world and the only one. And it played out exactly as we saw in the original game, the subsequent games, the books, everything that went into the original story up to and including the end of Advent Children. Sephiroth was technically still alive, it still existed, not necessarily alive, but still existed at the end of Advent Children, and the indication was that as long as Cloud remembered him, as long as he was alive in Cloud's memory, that some form of Sephiroth would always still exist in the life stream. Not really sure what would then happen if Cloud just died. Is that what it takes to finish Sephiroth for good in that version? Not really sure. But, you know, it left a very sliver of a door open for him at some point, but you kind of get the sense that they were supposed to put the end to Sephiroth at that point. We also have Aerith still in existence in the live stream, still able to influence the events of the world to some minor event, and she, with a vision of Zack at her side, is still at the end of Advent Children, provides the cure for the geostigma, and still there's that indication that, you know, she persists in the live stream. So I think that universe existed. It was originally the only thing. When we get to Remake, we have seen Aerith having knowledge and Cloud having visions, and Aerith sharing knowledge and visions of the original story that we got. And I don't think those were visions of the intended or fated future. I think they were visions of the other world that was the OG7 world. There's never really been an indication that people can actually see and predict the future, but we have absolutely seen an indication that we can see into other worlds. We also know that the live stream is more or less independent of time. The worlds can exist side by side at different points in time, if you will. The doomed worlds seem to be devoid of time, and it passes as needed. So the lack of clock hands that I covered multiple times in the playthrough, combined with, you know, the time is still progressing seemingly normally in our world. I'm not going to get into the fact that, you know, you very rarely see the sun set, and you can fast travel all over the world 18 million times without the sun actually setting. It's a video game. But so time within the live stream seems to be very relative and subjective, really. So I think we're seeing into that original world and the fate that was there in that story, and all the times we see flashes from OG7 or the equivalent. I don't think that's a into the future. I think that's a alternate world, and you're seeing bits of it. Now, since we have versions of Aerith and Sephiroth that both seem to know things beyond the world we're in, I think that all but confirms the existence of what I've been calling Ultimate Aerith and Ultimate Sephiroth. I know there have been some other names put out there by people, and I'm pretty sure I got that term, the Ultimate, from someone else's theory somewhere out there. I tried not to read too much of other people's theories. I read bits and pieces, but the more comprehensive their theory was, the less I wanted to read about it, because I wanted to form my own opinions. But I'm pretty sure I got that term from somewhere else. Now, the reason we have the world that we do in this story, I think, is because of something that happened after Advent Children. And this Ultimate Aerith and Sephiroth seem to have this existence that is beyond our time and space of the world that we've been living in, the Beagle world. Now, we know the existence of the Dead Worlds, and as Sephiroth explained them, that these choices, these moments that create the other worlds, some of them don't last very long and they die, and we've seen that happen in the storyline we've experienced. And what would seem to me to make sense is that, and I've sort of touched on this in the walkthrough, is that the further away from the original Fated story, the OG7 story, the further away you get, the faster your world dies. We don't know exactly what happened in some of the world, like that Zack was in. I don't know, for instance, if there were two Zack worlds parallel, that everything was happening the same, and then when we get to the tunnel, one of those worlds went left and one of those worlds went right. And up until then, the worlds were the same, so there was no need to differentiate between them, and so we were just following the one. And then we get to that choice, and we get to see what those two options were. That's possible. Or we're in the one world that goes up to the point, and then that choice creates the other world. Either way could make sense. Neither of which was a sustainable world, because they were already doomed because of what started Zack's world, which seems to be the death of the party. That would seem to be the defining difference. Maybe not necessarily what caused that, but whatever it was, killed everybody except Aerith. Red made it a little bit longer and then died in the helicopter, we assume. We don't know what happened to Cloud, but that's a pretty damn big difference when it comes to the fate of the original storyline. And it's almost from the get-go, Zack gets Cloud, gets Aerith, goes into the little shack. Within a matter of, a couple of days or so, we don't really, it's hard to tell, because again, time. Elmira shows up, Zack walks out, sees the sky, it's broken. That world is doomed from the outset. And that's true for all of the rest of Zack's stuff. I have said, ever since we were climbing Mount Coral in the story playthrough, that the world we've been in, the Beagle world, is also doomed. And I think it's going on and has lasted as long as it has, and is still close enough to retain time, etc., because we are following almost the original storyline still. There's some little tiny divergences here and there, but nothing big enough to break us away from the main story. And I think Aerith checking the sky when she does, and she doesn't do it all that often, but I think Aerith keeping an eye on that is Aerith tracking, is the crack getting bigger? Are we starting to diverge away from the original story? Because she's lost most of her knowledge of what that story was. And by the time we're in Rebirth, she doesn't have most of the knowledge. She may still retain some. It's hard to know exactly for sure. But she certainly lost most of it. And so, I think that is her way of tracking, are we still going here? Are we still on the original path close enough that this world will keep going? When she knows that she's not going to be around any longer, she finds a way to pass the knowledge of that on to Cloud. Now he can see the sky. Whether that was through some other mechanism or just by having had it pointed out to him, maybe him having crossed worlds allows him to see it. Regardless, Cloud can now see it, and I think if we start seeing our path diverge from the original story too much, if they start giving us a different path to follow, I think we're going to see the crack in the sky get a little bit worse. And I think that'll be, and I don't know if it'll be pointed out to us, but that's something to look for visually, and I'll be looking for it at least when we get to part 3. But the point of that is, Sephiroth made a push for his goal and to win in Rebirth. He didn't make it. And it was because of Aerith. And we'll kind of get to that here. And I covered mostly in the ending of the wrap-up for the actual, that final video for Chapter 14. But really, in short, Sephiroth was trying to break Cloud. when he brought him in between worlds and he was explaining the whole multi-world theory inside the live stream, he tells him, Sephiroth is trying to see if Cloud can hear what he describes as the planet's voice, and everything Sephiroth is hearing, Cloud still says it's screaming, which Aerith has told us Sephiroth can't hear the planet's screams. Way back in Remake. Cloud is hearing the screams, which means he's not where Sephiroth needs him to be yet, so Sephiroth says, maybe you need a little push. That push is Aerith's death. That was his plan, is to get Cloud to this point where Aerith dying breaks Cloud at least enough that Sephiroth can have more control and can use that to help drive this negativity of the reunion and merge the worlds, which is part of his end goal plan. We'll get more to that in just a second here. So Sephiroth needs the world to keep going along the original path because his push for Rebirth failed. So now he's got to keep this world going on long enough until he can get to essentially the next point, which is probably when Cloud gives him the black materia at the North Crater. Last ditch effort will be at the end of the original storyline when we go down into the crater to stop him. There's a few of these benchmarks here where Sephiroth can try his influence against Cloud again, and I think him failing will just keep the world going on longer and us following the original story. Aerith wants us to follow the original story as well, Ultimate Aerith, because she wants to get to the point where Cloud is recovered, at which point essentially she wins at least the original story. I think Aerith is pushing for more than that, though. We'll get there. So, what started this whole thing? Why does Remake exist? Why does this world we're in exist? I've seen the argument that OG7 didn't exist, that it's a future thing, but I think given everything that we've seen in this story that we've been given, I find that less likely than it having already happened in its own world and us, and then, something giving us this option of Remake. What that is, we really don't have enough info. So this is pure guesswork on my part. And my guess is that it's sort of a freak combination of post-Advent Children Sephiroth's awareness raging against his failure yet again with Cloud. And we've seen in the books, we've seen where Sephiroth is hinging his focus on Cloud. He wants Cloud to know that he's the one that did it. He wants everything to do with Cloud. He's going to use Cloud as his way of getting back. Cloud is Sephiroth's linchpin and this focus of his everything. Cloud is also the focus of Aerith's everything. And so Sephiroth raging against his failure and wanting to find some way of changing that, and just lashing out and just focusing so much on this. At the same time, Aerith, while being more accepting and possibly starting to dissipate into the live stream, is yearning and thinking about possibly what might have been with Cloud. All the things that might have been saved or changed of the world, the people that she knew and loved, all the mistakes that were made, the loss of the world, the plate falling, all the bad things that happened, and just wishing desperately that there had been some way of changing that. And the two of them at the same time, sort of at the same stage of things of starting to break up into the live stream, these are the two most powerful entities sort of alive on the planet. They are suffused and present in the live stream. Sephiroth may also still have some power and influence of Jenova left over with him. That's an awful lot of power, especially suffused in and built up with the live stream. The two of those combined for an instant of wanting to change something may have been enough to spark the possibility. Just the possibility. And so Remake, that world happens. Not enough to spawn multiple worlds, but just the possibility world, if you will. Because what happens in Remake is, it seems like Aerith and Sephiroth are both kind of trying to change things and sort of feeling out what's possible and what's not possible. So I've seen the idea that Sephiroth tried to keep Cloud from meeting Aerith when he did by their initial confrontation in Remake, and just to delay him long enough for Aerith to wander off, then they don't meet. The Whispers hold Aerith in place until Cloud gets there, and then they disappear. Hey, look! Nice meet cute. And then, the Whispers are always intervening to restore the original story. And every time they try to change something, Aerith tries to help them move along through the sewers to get to the plate to stop the plate from dropping. And she's, with all of her knowledge about what's going on in the world and the possible future, she seems intent and on saying, maybe we can stop it, maybe we can get there, maybe it can happen, don't give up hope, that sort of thing. So she can't be the one to do it necessarily, but she's trying to set things up where it can happen. And they get there and it's kind of too late. Well, now maybe she can help save Wedge. Well, that didn't work. Sephiroth stabs Barret. Well, that didn't work. Like, all along the way, that these little things, some important, some less important, where Aerith and Sephiroth seem like they're kind of trying to change things, feeling out the waters, and it doesn't work. Because they're doing them separately. The one time something works, and there actually is a chance to permanently change fate, it's because both of them are involved. Sephiroth opens the path, is setting this up. There's not really an indication of what's going to happen if we had just left Sephiroth alone at the end of Remake. He gave us no indication he was going to go fight the Whispers, that he was going to take on Whisper Harbinger, or that he was going to do anything else when he went there. He literally was just opening the door for us. And then Aerith says, well, if we go through there, this is what happens, etc., etc. Aerith wasn't going to open the door, or maybe she couldn't. Sephiroth could open the door, but probably couldn't do what was required next. It took both of them, both of their actions and power and everything being focused enough to actually make the fight with Whisper Harbinger happen, and that broke fate. And now, all of a sudden, new worlds get created, new possibilities happen, and the first thing that happens, arguably, is Zack's life gets saved. Biggs' life gets saved. Biggs and Aerith have a history as when they were kids. They knew each other. Zack, obviously, strong connection with Aerith. The two people whose fates were unarguably changed in that instant of this New Worlds things, both happen to have very strong ties to Aerith at one point or another. Aerith's childhood and Biggs, a little more tenuous, but still may have been on her mind as something to try and change, because she couldn't stop the pillar. Biggs died there. So that could have still been something that was sort of forefront for her wanting to fix. Zack, of course, would be on anybody's mind to save if they knew who he was, because Zack is awesome. And so that's the very first thing that happens, and we see the Whisper explosion over Midgar right as Zack's being saved, and Zack ends up in this world where the party has died, still toting his cloud along. We don't know what happened to that cloud, by the way. That cloud is still sitting in a coma in a wheelchair last we saw. I'd just like to point that out. All three Zacks that we know of in worlds with that cloud either died or got shipped off in between worlds by Sephiroth. So presumably those worlds have all died and faded away, and that cloud is just gone. So all of the worlds that we see, I think everything starts at the moment of the end of Remake when we beat Whisper Harbinger. Duh. Nothing everything, like all the worlds we see, all seem to share the events up to that point in common. Hence, we see the only other worlds we see are Zack with everybody knowing who Cloud is, and the events of Remake having happened, etc. And so, I think there aren't alternate worlds that happen before that. The closest thing we have is Aerith plucking Zack and plucking Biggs from before that in the timeline of their respective worlds, perhaps. Possibly from the timeline of the original world, the Beagle world, if you will, and putting them in. We have not had Zack suddenly go, wait a second, that's not Stamp. Stamp's a Beagle. So we have no indication of knowledge of exactly, what world Zack might have come from or whatever. So I think all the worlds we see, every possibility, all the different options that could have spawned new different worlds. Right now, all the differences we see seem to be centered around Zack, but I would suggest that that's just because Zack's story is the one we're seeing. We have to see it through somebody's eyes, a playable character, for us to experience it. Zack is the logical choice, therefore his choices in left or right or whatever are the ones that are spawning these worlds. That doesn't mean that there aren't other worlds out there that were created by choices and major event differences as we played through Rebirth, for instance. I would not put it past them to give us glimpses. I don't know that we'll see into those worlds or play in those worlds at all, but I wouldn't put it past them to show us glimpses of a world where some things happened differently. There's a lot of different dog breeds they can use. And so just sort of as a quick thought experiment, I was like, okay, well, what are some major events during the chapters that might have gone differently that could spawn an entirely different world because it was a significant enough event? So right off the bat, chapter 2, what if Broden chose not to help us? Because he said he was taking a risk and in helping us, and he might live to, he might regret it later, etc. So what if Broden chose not to help us? We might still have made it out of Calm, other things might have happened, but that's a pretty big difference right off the bat that got us out of Calm safely. And, not having Broden help us, we could have started a fight with Shinra in Calm and severely affected the lives of the people there. We would not have gone necessarily to Broden's friend, who pointed us to the swamp area, which then got us to Chocobilly for the Chocobos to cross with his Midgar Sormer, etc. All that came from Broden telling us, hey, go talk to my friend. Small thing, but could have had a very big impact on the story. Chapter 4, I don't know, there's a whole lot in Chapter 3 that in the mines that really would have made a big difference. You could make an argument, though. Chapter 4, what if we didn't stop Yuffie, or excuse me, what if Heidegger didn't push Rufus out of the way, for instance? Or what if we successfully stopped Yuffie and she never made the attack? Two different outcomes there. We could have struck the deal with Rufus if Yuffie hadn't interrupted things. So right there you've got Rufus dying, and us at least temporarily forming an alliance with Rufus. Two possibilities from that one moment that could have spawned different worlds. Some very different outcomes at that point, especially Rufus dying. Chapter 4, 5, 6, Costa del Sol. What if Johnny chickened out? What if Yuffie decided not to help? What if she's like, oh, well, these guys are done for. I'll go find someone else to help me now. Yuffie not being with us, or failing to save us if Johnny didn't help her, or what she tried didn't work. Pretty damn big impact since we were all being captured at the time. So that's that would be one. Sort of the next big one that I thought of was, what if Dyne killed Barret when they fight? That would be a pretty damn big divergence right there, wouldn't it? Or what if we saved Dyne? What if Dyne was like, Marlene is alive? Oh my! What if that brought him and snapped him back, and Dyne lived? Not sure what impact that would have had on the story, but as a world, that could have been a pretty big difference. Obviously, Barret dying would be the bigger one, but there could be a world out there where that happened. I don't really get what it lasted very long, though. Let's see. What else? In Gungaga, what if Cloud succeeded in killing Tifa? And when he attacked her? I think that world would last about a half second before the sky cracked open and everything was destroyed, because we need Tifa. But yeah, I mean, that stuff like that, major moments that could have gone slightly differently, wouldn't have taken much. What if Nanaki backed out and chickened out in the Cave of the Gi? You know, what if never found out the truth about Seto? We never made it down to discuss with Gi Natak. What if, when Bugenhagen approached Nanaki, he made the choice to suggest something about his father and Nanaki's like, screw that. I'm not dealing with my dad's story, dude. And it just played out differently, and Nanaki didn't go down there. Wouldn't necessarily affect the original story, but in the story we're getting in Rebirth, could be very different without that. What if Vincent decided not to help us at all down underneath Shinra Manor? Or, decided not to come accompany us? He didn't do a whole lot since he wasn't fighting in our party, but he had the radio idea for tracking CaitSith after the Keystone betrayal. He secured our way out of the Temple of the Ancients. So, I mean, he did play a couple of roles to keep him relevant in the story. So that would have a pretty damn big impact if he wasn't along with us. And then the last one that I was wondering about, really trying to hit on most of the major characters, really one option for each at least. What if Cait didn't betray us? What if he decided to take a chance and keep the Keystone for Cloud's party? We get to the Temple of the Ancients first. We're the first ones to go in. Does Shinra even know where it is without Cait? I mean, it's in their files, so they may still have found it, but they wouldn't have been able to get in unless we got there first. In which case, we're advancing through before they are. Sung doesn't get stabbed? I mean, there are all sorts of possibilities. And again, I don't know if we'll get to see anything along any of these lines. It was just something I thought of, and a little bit of a fun thought experiment to sort of see what some of these other worlds might look like. I did not pursue, okay, what would really happen in this kind of world? Well, this would happen and that would happen, because that was taking it a bit too far. So the end goals of our two major ultimate players, if you will. I've gone over where I think this came from and how I think Remake came to be, and touched on what each of their goals is. For starters, again, I think they're both now vested in us following the OG7 sequence of events fairly closely, but sort of for their own reasons. Sephiroth wants to keep us going because either he will have another chance to break Cloud at the crater. Ultimate Sephiroth knows this. In-world Sephiroth, who really is, at this point, is Genovaroth, because just like in OG7, all the Sephiroths we've seen physically present have been clones. The black robes under the influence of Genova and Sephiroth's will, and then they transform into a version of Sephiroth, and some of them then get a little bit of Genova and transform into a version of Genova, but they're all still that thing. And Genova, I think, is limited to our world. I don't think that Genova is pushing for a cross-world experience or a win like Sephiroth is. Genova's goal was go to a planet, destroy things, maybe make things in your own image, and if that doesn't work, destroy things and move on to another one. In Advent Children, Sephiroth delivers a line after he's been reincarnated, I believe, during his fight/conversation with Cloud, and he says, What I want, Cloud, is to sail the darkness of the cosmos with this planet as my vessel, just as my mother did long ago. Then one day we'll find a new planet, and on its soil we'll create a shining future. So arguably that was Jenova's goal originally, was just going to a new planet, starting a new thing. Well, that didn't work. And, you know, if that doesn't go, destroy thing, gather your power, and move on to another place. Sephiroth then is setting up this possibility of doing that for himself, combined with his combined Jenova awareness and powers and presence, gathering the power of the life stream, not so much to just ascend to godhood, which was sort of his OG7 goal, but by Advent Children, this seemed to be more what he was going towards of, okay, we'll just drain everything we need to from here, power ourselves through the cosmos, and go land on some other planet and rule there and establish things. Which is kind of a theme, which we'll get to. And so that's Advent Children Sephiroth's goal. Ultimate Sephiroth, who's the next layer of that, the next step beyond that, which Ultimate Sephiroth has the knowledge of the multiple worlds existing within the life stream and everything now. So I don't think Ultimate Sephiroth was who was in Advent Children. I think that was still just the original one, who then, with the creation of Remake and the spawning of the possibility, that opened up this universe to Sephiroth's awareness and Aerith, and that was when he really began to think bigger. And so Sephiroth's goal is either in Turning Cloud or however he pulls it off, is the reunion, which, as he said in Rebirth, is not just, we know the reunion is originally Jenova's cells coming back together and reforming. That's the reunion theory that Hojo was all about in OG7. I'm not sure if Hojo is aware of the broader implications of the reunion theory now, the recombination of worlds. Possibly through the existence of Jenova and the different Genovas in different worlds, or possibly just through changing fate in the different worlds. Sephiroth is trying to recombine them, and in each of the worlds make the whole process as dark as possible to turn the life stream black, which was mentioned in one of the books as well. And this idea of when it's all reunified in the reunion, he is basically in charge of that fate. And the Dark Whispers have been guiding his will and his desires of fate in the world we're in, because this is the world that is lasting. This is the world that broke fate from the Whispers, but is still going on because we're still mostly following the OG timeline. All the other worlds, we don't see Whispers in them, except when Sephiroth appears, does something like sending Zack off, and that's it. There's no fate in those other worlds to be followed. This world, the Beagle world, is the only one that has a lasting presence of Whispers, dark or light. And so Sephiroth's will being enacted by the Dark Whispers is trying to push this world especially toward that darker fate, so that when the full reunion happens, the only outcome, the outcome of this world will become the only outcome of the broader universe, and that is a darkening of the life stream and Sephiroth's ability to claim the power and ascend to godhood-ish, but basically move on with or without Jenova and go find another world where he can actually make things happen the way he wants to. Because I think Gaia pretty much gets used up at that point. Jenova, I think, is limited to this story and is just trying to destroy Gaia, destroy the inhabitants, maybe absorb the power and move on, but I think that's literally just within this world. I don't think Jenova is really broadly aware of the implications of the live stream. I could be wrong, but all the indications we've seen of the world between worlds, I think, seem to be coming from Ultimate Sephiroth, not from any of the Genovaroth presences. Aerith's goal is very similar to Sephiroth's, keeping the original storyline going because she's counting on Cloud still being saved and coming to himself, and the inherent goodness that Cloud is a good person. He's got some severe trauma and a lot of messed up stuff going on in his head, but he's at heart a good person, and she is counting on that Cloud, the real Cloud that she's been trying to find and get in touch with and encourage and nurture throughout the story, counting on him recovering and being who he is when the key moments in the story come. And so her whole focus at this point has really been focused on saving Cloud and investing in him doing the right thing. Cloud is the only one who can defy Sephiroth when the moment comes, and who can ultimately defeat Sephiroth when the moment comes. And so I think by the end of part 3, the reunion is going to happen, and I'll go a little bit more in depth on that later. I don't think we can stop it, and I don't think we're really gonna try. That may be a stated goal, but as far as us playing the game and really diving in on the story, I don't think it's gonna be something that we're gonna get more than a passing idea about. Since I think both Sephiroth and Aerith are trying to make that happen, I think both influences are going to be guiding us that direction and not really allow us to pursue another option. So that's more or less, I think, what the broader story goals and source of where we are in the story and what's going to happen, broadly speaking, going forward. It's broad strokes. It's really hard to try and explain. If you have any questions or comments about any of that stuff that I was just going over, please ask in comments. If I didn't explain something very well, I will try when I have something I can type and edit and work through and something to respond with. So by all means, please ask. So, predictions. Part 3, I think, is going to be very plot heavy. Part 2 is very relationship heavy and literally you see it happening in the little smiley faces over people's heads. But most of the story in Part 2 in Rebirth has been about explaining backstories and who these people are and building the relationships between us. And I think that's so they can rely on that storytelling and the relationships they've built. They can now start making things happen. And so all the character building has been done. We even have beginnings of an idea of who Vincent is. We've got some relationships building with Sid and some knowledge and a little bit of rapport back and forth. We know who he is, that sort of thing. Those two obviously still give us new characters to explore and play with as we get into the game. But I think Part 3 is going to have some heavy exposition when the time comes, and it's just going to lean on us already knowing what's happening between, Sid with his backstory with the Fallen and why he liked Aerith and why he might still be around. Vincent having something to do with Sephiroth, and that's why he's there. Like, all these things that are there, they're not going to go a whole lot into the detail, and they will be counting on us having played 1 and 2. So, some little predictions to start things off with. Start light. I think Queen's Blood is coming back, but I don't think it's going to have the plot behind it. I think that's more or less played out. They could still do something with it. It wouldn't be that hard to give us a story and continue it in some way, but I think the fact that they really dove in and did a good job with it in Rebirth means they don't really need to try and keep going with it. So I think they try and give it to us just as a card game. They might expand it more since everybody loved playing it. I think it might branch out a bit and turn into more like an FF8, FF9 card game available to just play people more broadly speaking. Could still be a tournament of some sort and some challenges because they really seem to enjoy giving us those. But I don't think there's going to be this anything with the Shadow Blood Queen anymore. We might have to rebuild our deck though. So, 2 things I'm really hoping we're going to get that I've been sort of thinking of all the way along. One is a callback to Crisis Core. I really hope we're going to get materia fusion, and we're going to start seeing some new combinations and variations of materia. We got a little bit of it this time, realistically speaking, because we got fire and ice, lightning and wind, and the poison and whatever the one that went with it. And so they have these combination ones already now built in. I think we should get more of those, and possibly the option of making our own. I think that would be pretty damn cool. They did it in Crisis Core, so the idea exists in world, and giving us some flexibility of what we can combine and not combine would maybe give us something to do with some of the material we keep collecting, because I had a crap ton of it by the time I got through with my second playthrough especially. Good lord. Much less the extra playing I had to do on the side. So yeah, I'm dripping materia at this point. And it's all maxed out. I would love something to do with it. Maybe take these two, combine those. Hey, I got a dark fire. Hey, let's evolve that one. You know, some of the stuff we saw in Crisis Core, I think would be pretty damn cool. The other thing I think that could give us some flexibility and new variation and ideas in how we use equipment and materia is a 3-linked set of, in armor and weapons. So if you can set up an elemental and 2 greens attached to it, or HP absorb on 2 different possibilities, or whatever, HP absorb and MP absorb on fire. All the different possibilities you could get just by having armor with 3 slots that are all linked together. Sword with 3 slots that are linked together. You could really get some new creative things built just with that one simple change. And I think that could be a really simple way of giving something to us to play with that really get people crafting and talking. Is, oh, hey, what are you doing with it? Oh, I figured this idea. If you do these 3, then you can do this one, and this works much better like that. Like, it would really give a lot of theory crafting ideas in how to build character kits. I think it'd be really cool. And a simple thing to enact, I think. Now, down into the actual story predictions of things that I want to see and that I hope we might see. Like, these are all possibilities. I'm not completely pulling stuff out of my butt here. I think the Midgar 7th is going to come back, just like they did in OG7, even though you didn't know who it was. I think we're going to see them when we go to the sunken reactor for the submarine. I think we'll see the commander and her immediate subordinate and a couple of the other dudes that we ran around with in Junon. I think they make a reappearance. That's the perfect place to bring them back. It fits with the original story, and it's a nice callback. So I see that one happening very easily. The submarine, just continue that thought along, I think there's going to be some differences. What I would love to see from the submarine is exploring the sunken city of the original Junon. Because Junon was originally a flotilla of boats that were essentially bonded together into making a floating city that was, that for the Republic of Junon, that was their capital, was this floating city. And then it sank. And then Shinra made the big warship-inspired Junon with the cannon and everything. But that city could still be there, and just under the ocean. Well, we have a submarine now. That'd be a cool thing to be able to go down and explore, even just in the submarine, possibly with, environmental suits on of some sort that let us get out and walk around in the water a little bit. There's not really a clear explanation of how, in OG7, for instance, when we find the Relnica, how we get into the Relnica. It's not equipped with a submarine dock and a hatch to hop out and just climb in from one to the other. You just don't really question the fact that you go there in the submarine and you touch it, and now suddenly you're in the Relnica. And then when it's time to leave, you climb up the stairs and you're back in your submarine. Realistically speaking, there's not a way to get from one to the other. Having some sort of suits would at least give you a path. That necessitates the possibility of maybe a little bit of underwater exploration. I would say it's going to be very, very limited if we do, and it'll be just in this contained area of getting from submarine to Relnica, submarine to Sunken City, possibly some areas of the Sunken City that still have air, for instance. Who knows? I would say probably not that, but the other thing that I would think would be interesting in the Sunken City, and a reason to go there in the story, is if that's where the Key of the Ancients is. Because there's not necessarily a good reason why the Key of the Ancients is just sitting in a cave somewhere down a long corridor underwater. Hey, look, there's a big spiky thing that we need. And I don't even remember how you're supposed to know where it is. It's been so long since I've played OG7 and needed something to tell me to go find it. I just know, got the submarine, go down there, grab the thing, and then I have it when I need it. But having it be in the sunken city of the Junon Flotilla, their capital, I think that'd be a really cool way of tying things together. And it would make sense that a world power might have something like that around. Dio had the keystone in the gold saucer. This is another relic of the ancients they might have kept on hand that just went down with the city. I think it'd be pretty cool. A couple of quick minor character predictions. Major character, minor prediction. I think Vincent is going to be playable pretty much right off the bat. I think he is our new Red. That as soon as we get into our story proper, he's gonna. I'll fight with you now, because there's not a reason him not to fight with us anymore. He's been hanging around. He's been doing stuff. He just hasn't fought as a member of the party. So immediately introducing that, giving us a new character dynamic and combat system to explore, I think it's a perfect opportunity, and I think we get that right away. I don't think we get Sid though, and I think Sid will get us to where we need to go to start with, and then he's going to leave. I'll come back to that in a second. Minor characters and predictions for them. I think Leslie is going to be reunited finally with Merle. I think that was her name. I think we'll get a side quest around it. We'll help facilitate this, most likely. It's going to be an optional thing, just like his presence was in this one with the underground combat arena side quest. But it'll be something you can find. He'll finally find her. They'll be reunited and then go off, maybe back to Midgar. I think Roche will come back. Obviously, he still seems to be alive at the end of Rebirth. He is one of two characters that we know of who is a black robe and an individual person who we can identify and might give a damn about their fate, which is, I think, what his role was in this one in having transformed. So I think in part 3, Roche will be back, and if it is at all possible to come back from the influence of being transformed into a black robe and regaining who you were and your identity, etc., I think Roche is going to be the one to do it. Because, again, he's the only character we give a damn about. Broden is the same thing, but we don't really... I mean, we care about him as a person we met for 5 minutes. Roche has been with us across both games and presumably into part 3, so if anybody is gonna come back from that, if it's at all possible, it's gonna be Roche. And God knows what happens at that point. If not, I think he'll still have a moment, either dying at an important moment, maybe he transforms into a version of Genova down in the crater. That would be mean, but something they might do. So there's a couple of possibilities. So I don't think we've seen the last of Roche. It's a little hard to predict what they're going to do with it. And the last minor character prediction that I have really is Billy. I think Billy's going to come back with a final quest for us, because I'm not convinced Billy's parents are dead. Billy's parents signed up for Shinra experiments and were never seen again. That's what Sam told us. And his sister told us that, they died in an accident. Well, that's the kind of thing you tell a little kid when you can't or won't explain more of what really happened with them. Billy just knows we lost our parents at a young age. That's all he really says about it, if I remember right. You don't get a lot of information. And they were signed up for this thing with the Dawn, and sure, they went off and they got experimented on. I just keep coming back to Edge's parents in FF4 and how they were experimented on and screwed with and transformed into the monsters. I don't think we're going to get anything quite that dramatic, but I think the possibility of that one or both of his parents is either still alive in some form or fashion, or at the very least, there's still more to pursue on that storyline. And we may find out they actually are dead, but I think there's more there. Billy even asked us, if an opportunity comes along for revenge, you'll help me out, won't you? Opening that door to more to do with him. Also, of course, chocobo breeding. We haven't gotten it so far. Having quests around Billy brings him into the storyline and gives us the possibility of finally breeding frickin' chocobos in this remake experience. Because the devs have to know we all want to do it. Even the people who hated breeding chocobos in OG7 are wondering, are we going to get to breed chocobos in this thing? And then everybody else who enjoyed it or thought it was a fun gimmick or whatever, we want to breed frickin' chocobos so we can make faster chocobos. Putting gear on them to change their stats for the races is all well and good, but we want to breed some frickin' chocobos. So I think that would be a way of giving that to us, is through a Billy quest, and then we get access to the farm and can start capturing some chocobos and bringing them to him. I mean, they bred pretty fast and grew up pretty fast in OG7. I don't know how that would look in a more realistic time frame in a game, but the possibility exists at least. Main character predictions. Starting with the very beginning of the game. I kind of think, and this sort of depends on the story they're trying to tell with him, we may get a young, playable Sephiroth at the beginning of Part 3. Just like we got the young, playable Cloud Zack for the Nibelheim incident in this one, the flashback. I think going back and telling us something of Sephiroth's past, not entirely sure what, but telling us something of Sephiroth's past would give us tutorials, intro to combat play as Sephiroth, which I'm not convinced we're not going to get a playable Sephiroth towards the very end. We'll come back to that one. But it gives us background for him to tie in with some of the other games that we've been seeing in Ever Crisis, so they could give us whatever they feel is most important from that time without making us go play Ever Crisis to see it. So Ever Crisis and the First Soldier and Before Crisis, whatever they want to give us, would have more detail and more fleshed out information and experience, etc. But you could probably find some time frame in there to give you the story and the info that they want to tell you about Sephiroth's past. Use that as the introduction of some sort. Not sure how, but it wouldn't be that difficult to work out. Maybe cloud dreaming it. I don't know. But then that might give us our introduction and everything we need, and then there's chapter 1, and then we move into chapter 2 as would be normal. Chadley. Obviously I think Chadley's going to be around for part 3. He didn't die. I think Maya will be back as well. I'm kind of of the opinion that Maya is more along the lines of Chadley's daughter, and I mentioned it while we were in the Gold Saucer at one point. I think daughter relationship more than girlfriend. And if not, they'll sort of clarify that maybe, but that's my indication at the moment. But I think Chadley will be back, and I think there's going to be some Hojo Chadley shenanigans going on. Chadley is still collecting information, and Hojo may have access to that information and be plucking it from Chadley, or we don't, we're still not entirely sure what's happening, because Hojo was suddenly like, wait a second, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, only 6 Chadleys. One Chadley was missing, ours. And so the other Chadleys still exist. Our Chadley is there, and Hojo is aware of him and could have access to his info. So what happens if we go to fight Hojo when we get to Midgar, and Hojo tries to either make Chadley fight us, puts him in a robot body, or our Chadley body, and makes us fight him, or a holographic simulator that we have to get through to get to Hojo, possibilities exist. So we either have to fight an incarnation of Chadley, or Chadley resists that possibility and fights back against Hojo and stands out on his own and proves he's a real boy. But Hojo still uses all that information that he got from Chadley to create something for us to fight. Also, possibility there that something there is what Hojo uses when he takes the Genova cells and transforms himself when we fight him on the weapon, on the Sister Ray. Somewhere in there, I think we're going to get a Hojo-Chadley interaction and butting heads, and Chadley may end up sacrificing himself to help us, or Chadley may live on. I honestly don't know which is more likely with the way they've been playing Chadley. Because as obnoxious as he is sometimes, you know people get attached to Chadley. And if they take Chadley away from us, people are going to be really pissed off. We already hate Hojo's guts to no end. Why not have him kill Chadley? I don't know what's going to happen, but I would not put it past them at this point. And there's one more thing on Chadley towards the end, but I think Chadley will keep giving us more summons. We obviously still have Hades and Bahamut Zero and a couple others from OG7 to work with. And I mentioned in the end of my main playthrough, or the story playthrough, that Knights of the Round obviously is still out there. That could be sort of a post-game thing that you pick up. It is the ultimate ridiculously OP materia from OG7, and you could very easily make the argument that there are enough regions around the world after we get full world exploration for each region to give us one piece of something that we need for the 12 Knights of the Round. I saw someone make that argument and that suggestion, and I think that'd be a great way of implementing it and giving it to us, make us really work for it. So, I mean, we had to wait until the very end of the game to get to Gilgamesh, so I think this would be the equivalent of that, and possibly it takes us into post-game to really finish it off, because I don't think they want to give us Knights of the Round. If it's going to be that damn powerful, I don't think they want to give it to us before making us go fight Sephiroth at the end. For a hard game playthrough, maybe, because at that point you've earned it. If you play through towards the very end of the game, now you get the last thing you need on hard mode to unlock Knights of the Round. Go wild with it. So, I think that would be an interesting way of giving that to us. Rufus. So Rufus, you don't really hate Rufus as much. He is an interesting villain already from the original story, but you don't really hate Rufus nearly as much as some of the other antagonists. Scarlet and Heidegger, especially Hojo, you really kind of hate their guts to one degree or another. But I never felt, and I never really seen anybody else express the same animosity towards Rufus. And in the books, and in Advent Children, and in other media, he is not more sympathetic, but more redeemable. He seems to be taking seriously the idea of redeeming Shinra's image in the world and trying to do something with what's left of the company to fix things and help people. He tries to engage the Turks in less murder espionage, more espionage, finding ways to make things work and help in the world. Still a bit power hungry-ish and keeping, charge of things. Some of it may be a little bit self-interested as he comes down with geostigma and therefore wants to help kind of solve it to save his own. But he is not the full-on power-hungry antagonist that he is in the original storyline. And so I think they've already given that a little bit to us just by letting us see more of Rufus firsthand. He is a much more interesting and sympathetic character in the story we're getting now than he ever was in OG7. And so I think they're already starting to redeem Rufus a little bit, and I think that's going to continue in Part 3, especially when we get to Wutai and the whole Saruf question. So I think either Rufus may end up helping us at some point, Possibly when Hojo has proven he's completely insane with the Sister Ray. Or maybe he just sees what's going on. Maybe Reeve gets to him and gets through to him, rather, and convinces him to either get out of our way or actively lend some support at some point. It would have to be pretty late in the story, but I can see it happening, and it's a pretty simple way of redeeming his character somewhat without having to go overboard with it. In the original storyline, Rufus is still alive. I know that was a little bit of confusion because it looks like he may have died when you see Diamond Weapon attack Midgar, but the books do provide the mechanism through which he survived. It was an escape hatch that he, as a young kid, insisted his dad build, and his dad built it and made the secret button to access it, a button on his desk with the letter L to stand for loser. They had a great relationship, those two. So yeah, so Rufus survived that attack by activating the panic button and sliding down into a safe room, which I think then had like his birthday as the code to get out or something. So it was still a "this is just for you, my loser son" message going on with it. So he survived, and I think we'll see a little bit more of Rufus as we go, and like I said, I think they're going to try and redeem his character a little bit, and we may see the beginnings of him setting up Shinra's resources to try and fix things at the end of the story. We'll see. Cid. So, like I said, I think Cid is not going to be with us right at the beginning of the story. We have some sort of interaction and characters building with him and relationships, so it might make sense to do that with us, but we're getting Vincent almost certainly as a playable character right off the bat. That would make a lot of sense for Vincent to just join us at that point. Cid still has his own thing going on. He is still flying around, he's got a business to run. What if Cid gets a message that they're gonna restart the Shinra rocket? That would draw Cid away real fast and get him out of the party, would remove world travel from us when we're not ready to have it, because they want us going up the North Crater, for instance, on that first trip up the glacier. So having Cid recalled to Rocket Town takes the tiny Bronco away, because we don't need it for a while, gets him to a place where we know we're going to be going eventually, and gives us, the late edition character like CaitSith was and Yuffie was, to join us later on to spice things up and add someone to the party, so we're not getting two new characters right off the bat. Because it doesn't necessarily make sense for Vincent to disappear on us, but it makes perfect sense for Cid not to be around. And so we don't need fully explorable world, like even in OG7 when we got the tiny Bronco, you could go along the coastline, but you were still pretty limited in where you could go. And so starting us off with that level of accessibility and fast travel, I don't think would make a whole lot of sense. Letting us go to the crater, Cid leaves, and we run into him later. So I think Cid gets us maybe to an airstrip on that continent, possibly one near, an archaeological dig, for instance, at the Bone Village, or the Icicle Inn resort area has got to get there somehow to bring people to your hot springs and stuff. So there may be an airstrip there he can use and drop us off, and then Cid takes off. And then I think either Cid will rejoin us at Junon when we, in OG7, got the Highwind. We know it takes a skilled crew to operate the thing. So Cid could be involved in getting us the Highwind and escaping from Junon after Cloud has taken a dive in the live stream. Or I would not put it past them to have Cid still off in Rocket Town, and we just go try and hijack the Highwind, because that was what Barret wanted to do. And Cloud said, bad idea. So without Cloud there to say, that's a dumb idea, don't do that, and without Cid there to say, hey, let me get a crew together and we'll take it, the team might decide to go try and take the Highwind and crash it or at least manage to limp along as far as Rocket Town to go find Cid. And so that may be us getting Cid back at that point, or he may come in later on, but I would be inclined to believe that it's at one of those 2 points. Either getting us the Highwind from Junon, because that's when you would normally get it, or we go to Rocket Town and we start in on the big materia quest and we discover it, and maybe Cid doesn't join us right away, but he gives us the crew to operate it and says, you know, I'll join you in a little while, I'm working on this rocket thing. Or he says, okay, y'all keep going with the rocket, I'll be back. So there's some possibilities there. But that gives us a few chapters into the game before Cid joins us and gives us the second new playable character to work with. Yuffie! So Wutai obviously going to be a very big part of Part 3. They've been setting it up all along with the war all the way back to Remake, and then giving us Yuffie back in the Intergrade, and then it was always behind the scenes going on in Rebirth. We have the Rufus Sephiroth possible connection going on. We have Glenn happening. Like there's so much happening. Wutai is going to be a major part of the story that we're going to get in Part 3. I don't think anybody disputes that one. So my predictions for what we're going to get, though, obviously with Yuffie, we're going to be going back to Wutai. That's going to be her major character arc, just like it was in OG. I think Glenn Lodbrok, the real one, survived being shot by Rufus. And until we learn otherwise, that's what I'm going with. Because when Rufus met Glenn in Rebirth, he says, I thought you were dead. He's shocked to see him, yes, but he doesn't say, I killed you, or I know you're dead, who the hell are you? Like, he doesn't doubt or anything for a while there that this is Glenn Lodbrok. And if he had known that he killed Glenn, I think he would have been much less receptive to Glenn's presence there. So the possibility that Glenn survived is in Rufus's brain, and so he can accept this possibility that that's who this is. But I also think that Glenn, and I think Glenn may have been the one who showed up in the first scene in Junon, and I've talked about that during the playthrough a couple times. I think that may have been the real Glenn. He shows up and knows that Rufus is Sephiroth, maybe, or doesn't know that Rufus is the one that shot him. Because I think what's been going on in the background is that Sephiroth in Wutai is a Genovaroth clone, and has been, because Sephiroth there is the silent party. He is the reclusive leader that even Yuffie acknowledges is, often, besides, he's not the major person that they interact with. It's Glenn is the one that everybody seems to know about in the SRC. And so that Glenn is, in my mind at least, the real Glenn, still alive, and interacting with that version of Sephiroth. Now, if he knows that Sephiroth and Rufus are the same person, and comes to Junon, and is the real one interacting with him in that first scene, nothing changes. Like, that scene still plays out exactly the same. He's talking about their plans together. He is talking, and his mockery, from the Viceroy, congratulations on being president. And you can see, Rufus has a bit of a reaction to it. It's very mocking and sarcastic. Someone could be overhearing, so it makes sense, he just decides to deliver it as one little poke because he can get away with it. You don't know exactly the relationship going on there, but if that really is Glenn, I think it still makes sense that he's the one who's there at that point in the story. And I think that he is interacting with this other version of Sephiroth because Glenn, in that video after the Nibelheim chapter, is like, okay, and we're going to hear from Viceroy Sephiroth, and walks off. there are other people around him that would theoretically be expecting Sephiroth to show up right then. This is not, okay, guys, what's going to happen here is I'm going to do this. I'm going to intro Sephiroth, and we're all going to leave so that none of us see him walk out. And he's been hiding in the closet this whole time. None of y'all saw him. And when we're gone, then Sephiroth will appear. I think that's idiotic. But I can't see another way that scene played out if there wasn't someone over there playing the part of Sephiroth. And so then, of course, he doesn't show. That just makes things, heightens things. Like, you can see Rufus is watching going, who are they going to bring out? How is this going to work? And when nothing shows up, he's like, huh. And he and Sung have a little look between them. And so again, I think Sung knows Rufus is Sephiroth. But I don't know that Sung is keeping an eye on Sephiroth because he knows where Rufus is. So Rufus shooting Glenn could have been him trying to tie up loose ends for someone over there who knew who he was, who knew he'd been working with Wutai. And, the idea, I believe, was to foment this chaos so that he could then poke his dad and try and get the board to get his dad to retire. Rufus's end goal was really to get his dad out of power, let him take power, and show the old man who's boss. We've seen that they don't have a good relationship. And not long after that moment, when he shoots Glenn, we don't know exactly when that happens, by the way. As far as I know, there's no established date that I could find. I couldn't even find a year that specifically that happened in. Maybe in '01 I saw pointed out, but I couldn't even find verification for that. But not long after that moment, Rufus is put under house arrest, and he is under close supervision by the Turks at that point. So if Sung and the Turks are aware that Rufus was Sephiroth, they now have no reason to suspect that there's a Sephiroth over in Wutai. That Sephiroth, as a Genovaroth clone, then starts working secretively with the surviving Glenn, maybe even nursed him back to health, and says, oh, you were shot in the back by Sephiroth or by anybody else over there. Now those two are buddy-buddy and working together. He gets Glenn back to health, stays as the silent partner. Glenn runs the SRC and the interim government, working in close cahoots with Viceroy Sephiroth. But Sephiroth isn't talked about from that point forward, really. So there's no reason to go looking into it. Rufus is under house arrest and close observation by the Turks all the way up until the point where he becomes the new president. So they would know if he's still working actively, unless he's doing it a little bit clandestinely with computers, but he's not going over to Wutai to go help run things. And there's a good several years there between when he would have shot Glenn and been taken into custody and now in '07 when we're getting our storyline. So there's probably roughly 6 years-ish. I kind of think that they would have some indication that Sephiroth wasn't actually there anymore if there was nobody playing that part. I kind of think Sephiroth would not be keeping the Glenn persona active that long, the Genovaroth version over in Wutai, if that's not the real Glenn, if there isn't one anymore and he's just been impersonating the whole time. One of them is almost certainly a Genovaroth clone working to keep the war going behind the scenes. I would posit that it's the Sephiroth and that Glenn is alive, and that at least after the initial meeting between Glenn and Rufus, we know obviously that all the Glens from that point forward are Genovaroth. So having one on each side, stirring things up and seeding chaos and driving the world towards war and all the darkness, perfectly in keeping with Sephiroth's plans and Genova's established MO of taking the appearance of others to foment chaos and war. That is right out of Genova's playbook. Come on. So that's what I think is going on with there, and I think when we get to Wutai, we're going to start seeing that play out. Rufus and Glenn's relationship, whether Rufus makes it to Wutai himself, possibly. Could be the site of a final Rufus fight. Wouldn't put it past him. At the very least, the Turks, possibly Sung, if he's recovered by that point, may take an active part. We know, obviously, in OG7 that Rude and Reno and Elena show up, tracking down Corneo, which I think they'll probably still do, because we need Corneo in Part 3. Might as well keep him where he was in the original story. Sung might take an active part now, though, or get word back, and it's like, hey, we're meeting with Sephiroth this afternoon, and they send a picture, or they don't show up, and it's like, wait, how are you meeting with Sephiroth? Oh, we got a meeting with such and such. That's not possible. Sung starts to put things together. Lots of possibilities that could happen. They've got enough flexibility with the story that a lot of this is possible and could happen, and I could see it playing out a number of different ways. So, obviously, I think Yuffie is still going to have a story to play out with her dad. I think we're going to get the pagoda at some point, most likely on a second visit, because unlike OG7, in this version, her dad, Godo, is under house arrest. He's not playing the part of the passive Wutaian like he was in OG7, where Yuffie's like, ugh, my dad's useless these days, he didn't do anything, he's blah blah blah. When really, he's the most powerful person in Wutai and is the embodiment of the omnipresence, of the god's manifestation, etc., etc. And she never knew, because he's been keeping it under wraps, biding his time sort of thing. Well, in this case, he's under house arrest. We know there's a power disparity between the old fogies and the young people who want to stir things up and keep fighting. All these things that are playing into it. So there's going to be a confrontation of some sort between her and her dad. I think first we're going to resolve some of the political issues with Wutai, and then we'll come back like the equivalent of Chapter 12 Rebirth, where we're tying up storylines, getting powerful advancements in certain areas, etc. I think that's going to be a Chapter 12-ish style quest, is her resolving the pagoda thing with her dad and getting her ultimate weapon or ultimate limit break and that sort of thing. So I think that's where we're going with Yuffie. The other bit I think we're going to get with Yuffie and tying together is with Vincent. So Vincent, I think we're going to get more of the Lucretia story, because we got it in OG7. It's part of the original story lore. I think this time, though, we're going to get something more along the lines of some of the info from Dirge of Cerberus. So I think we're going to get the beginnings, at least, of the Chaos entity. I don't even know what word to use. Chaos weapon, Chaos something. But the Chaos thing that's a part of Vincent that Lucretia put there when Vincent was shot originally. Because Vincent's older than everybody else except, like, Bugenhagen. Like, Vincent's older than Red is. And, so, I mean, his story, his death would have happened a while back. And his tie to Lucretia obviously gave him that chaos power and is the whole spawn of the Dirge of Cerberus issue going on. So, when OG7 was out, Dirge of Cerberus wasn't a thing yet. I don't know that they really had much of an indication. I don't think they had any plans for it. I don't think anybody had an idea how popular 7 was going to be. So there would be no need for further stories and stuff. And so, but now we know that backstory. We know the additional stuff Dirge of Cerberus gave us. So there's an incentive for them to start giving it to us now. And so what I think is going to happen is we're going to get some Lucretia backstory, and it's going to lead us to Vincent going into the deep ground with Yuffie when we revisit Midgar. And I brought this up multiple times during my story playthrough, but Yuffie, I think, based on her trial, at the very least, it's been put into her head, maybe going back and checking on what Sonon's status is. Did Sonon survive? Is he still there in any way, shape, or form? And honestly, at best, I think we get a puppety Sonon presence or zombie Sonon or something. I don't know exactly, but we're not getting Sonon back. And any indication of Sonon being there is going to be a heart-wrenching experience with Yuffie, and going to tug, and it's going to be rough to get through. But I think there may be something there, but we're not getting Sonon back alive and well. But I think going into the deep ground with Vincent now, and I think if anybody, I think CaitSith coming, as the embodiment for Reeve, who is the director of, one of the directors of Midgar, specifically of the urban planning in the city, and his role in the future with the world organization, and his role in Dirge of Cerberus, etc., make CaitSith the most logical third person to outfit a whole team to go down in the deep ground. And I think they're going to take care of that whole thing. I honestly don't think we're going to get a Dirge of Cerberus remake. And I think the entire Dirge of Cerberus story is going to be rendered moot by the end of our story. More on that later. Next character, Nanaki. Speaking of some tie-ins with Vincent. So, I think Nanaki, obviously, he still is determined to help out the Gi. That was established in Rebirth. I thought it was a brilliant way of doing their story. They have to come back and give us more on that. And I think one of Nanaki's quests when we get back to Cosmo Canyon is going to be trying to resolve things and work with the Gi for an outcome. And the way that might happen involves a bit of Vincent lore. Because in Dirge of Cerberus, I didn't play it, so I'm basing this off of things that I read, so there may be better explanations in-game than what I'm going to give. But there's the Omega weapon, and then there's Chaos. And basically, Chaos's job is... Omega weapon is a last resort thing. It was created with the other ones, Emerald and Diamond and whatnot. But it is a last resort weapon. If things go completely south, Omega gathers all the life stream power and all of everything that it can and jets off and goes and finds another planet to establish itself. Well, first off, whose plan does that sound like? That sounds an awful lot like a non-sinister version of Sephiroth's plan. Sephiroth just wants to be the one controlling it and then gathering all that power himself, and then go surf the cosmos and find a planet for himself to establish and live on and rule over. Well, Omega Weapon's doing the same thing, just on behalf of Gaia and the planet and the lifestream itself. Chaos's job is to send all the life into the lifestream for Omega to gather. So Chaos's job is to kill all the things, and then Omega then sucks it all up and takes off. The Gi might have come to Gaia via something very similar, an Omega weapon from their planet, if you will. Before I thought of that idea with a version of their Omega, my assumption had been, because they're saying that, their star was subsumed by our star and they ended up on our world, and so my thought was a chunk of their world came and landed, very similar to Spirits Within movie, and so they literally had a piece of their world here that they were sort of bound to, and then they just couldn't get to a live stream. Well, what if their planet did something similar? May not have gotten away with a whole lot of them, because there's not, an overabundance of Gi, but there is a pretty damn strong presence of them. So what if they had an Omega weapon equivalent that drew in what it could as their world was dying, jetted off to go find a world to land on and reestablish, only the planet they landed on already had a life stream of its own going, Gaia, and thus they were stuck. If they had landed on a barren planet somewhere, their Omega might have been able to, seep in, take over, and start their own little life stream and get their people back up and running again, but they landed on this planet that already had its own spirit and awareness. And so they're stuck. What if Nanaki's story arc of helping the Gi is finding a way to reenact their Omega equivalent and sending them off? all along I had an idea, why not just gather the totems that house the Gi's spirits, whatever that is, the stuff that they have down there that's keeping them and that they go sleep in at night, whatever that is housing the Gi's spirit and presence, load that up onto a rocket, shoot it off into space. Get them away from Gaia, maybe that'll solve the problem. That was my idea from the first time we found out what they were. Well, what if that's actually not too far from the truth? Only we used their mechanism that brought them here. If it was this sort of Omega-like thing, load all and gather them all up in that and send them off. That may have been what the Gi wanted from the pure materia. That may have been their original goal, is getting this materia that allows them to activate and enact, and this whole plan of restoring their Omega and using it, because the black materia brings the destructive meteor down, and then in this case, blows up the world, and theoretically the Gi then escape. But if their original goal was just to escape and make this work and find a way to make things happen, that may have been the goal, was to activate their Omega. Well, how might they have come to a misunderstanding with the Cetrons? We don't know when they got the black materia. We don't know when things fell out between them and the Cetrons. What if it was 2,000-ish years ago? Say, when a space entity landed and started screwing with everybody and pitting everybody against each other. What if the Gi were influenced by Jenova and she convinced them that the Cetrons were responsible for them not being able to rejoin them, to die and move on, or that the Cetrons were going to act against them, or any of a number of things to convince them that the Cetrons were against them and responsible for their plight, and convince the Cetrons, hey, the Gi are planning this thing and they're going to do this thing and blah 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 blah, and it wouldn't be that hard to pit the two against each other with some misunderstandings. And all of that frustration and angst and everything that the Gi have been experienced for untold millennia, however long they've been stuck on Gaia, boils over into their rage and blackens their pure materia, and now the thing that was intended to activate their Omega now is a much more destructive option, and destroying Gaia, which gets Jenova her goal. It destroys the world, etc., etc. And so this goal of Jenova of land, take over, destroy things, kill a bunch of stuff, gather the power, and move on again. That's what the black materia does. And so getting the Gi to make it, but inadvertently on their part, is perfectly in keeping with Jenova's goals. And it's the way she works. It gets her to the end that she's looking for. It kind of fits together, I think. So I think that might have been the way things happen. And again, until we learn otherwise, that's what I'm running with here. So there may still be a way to access their Omega lifeboat weapon thing that brought them here. And again, I still think there's something significant about that stone off to the east of Cosmo Canyon that is a totally different color rock than everything else, but not in the way that, the lifey place that had the Typhon materia in it in OG7, where you got one of Cloud's weapons and stuff, that jungle atop in the Cosmo area. I don't think that's it. I think this is it's a very different colored rock in the middle of nowhere with nothing else around it like it. I kind of think that's where the Gi's thing may be stored. Still just my theory, because that colored rock is driving me nuts that it's there with no explanation. So, the other bits that I think we're getting... So I think Nanaki is going to deal with that in Part 3, and that's going to be a major plot advancement of what's going on, and I think it'll finish off towards the end of the story. I think we'll see it happen. The other thing I think we might get with Nanaki is at least there may be some indication about the existence of Danae, or however you pronounce her name, the female of his species. I don't think we're going to go on a quest to save her or rediscover her. It's possible. but it's not required. But an indication that she is there and her presence exists, something to give us a solid explanation for, hey, there's baby Reds at the end of the story. So, because we never got an explanation in OG 7 for where the hell he got kids from, because he was the only one of his species we ever saw. So, and we had to get further games and media to explain that to us. Well, those now exist, so they can reference them and fold them in and give us something in this story. I think that would be a smart way of doing it, but I don't think they need to really go the full distance and have us like actively rescue her or however she gets out of the stasis that she's in. So I think that would be a good way of doing that and giving us more info without going overboard, really. Barret. I have no freaking clue what they're going to do with Barret. The only thing that Barret really has left in the story from the original sequence is saving Corel from the huge materia train that is going to crush it and destroy the place. That's really the only major plot beat I can think of that involves Barret. And so I think we're going to get that. And he'll have some sort of reconciliation, and there'll be a moment we'll still have that go on. So he may take a slightly more active role, because that's really going to be his one big thing in Part 3. But, I mean, OG 7, once you got through dying, and once you took care of, and when you do the huge material that he's involved in, what else does Barret really do? There's no story beats at that point that really involve him. He has the bit in Junon where he helps get Tifa out, sort of. And it's really just, that gives you a reason to be playing somebody to get to escape Junon as. It's not really a Barret story, that's a whole party you just happen to be controlling Barret at the time. So, I think the last prediction really I have for Barret is that at the end of the story, I think we're gonna get to see him actually reunite with Marlene, which we didn't get. And so I predict we're gonna get that moment. And I also predict that when we see that, I am gonna lose the ability to speak properly for a couple of minutes, because my throat is gonna close up and I will not be able to talk. I might cry. It's possible. I don't normally cry. And this is not a manly thing or whatever. It's just, I don't normally. I tear up, don't get me wrong. But I very rarely actually cry. That might do it, though. At the very least, I know I won't be able to talk straight anytime I watch it for at least the first dozen times, probably. But, yeah, I think we're going to get it. And it's going to be a great emotion, but it's going to be a hard one. It's going to hit seeing those two finally get back together. Let's see. Reeve / CaitSith. I would really, really, really love to get some more information about his whole inspire thing, that he breathes life into other things, like CaitSith. Because that's all that says is that he is an inspire and he can do this thing. There is zero explanation for how or why he has this ability, where he got it from, nothing. We just know that he can. And that, I think, was just to give us more of an explanation than he was somehow sitting there with a remote control under the table while he was at board meetings controlling CaitSith the whole time. It was more of it is alive, not just a remote control. Well, how is it alive? Well, Reeve has this ability to do this thing. No explanation whatsoever. I would love some more information on that. Be really interesting if he breathed life into something other than an anthropomorphic cat, just for the sake of variety, just to show us he can at some key moment. Might be kind of cool. The other thing that I think might happen is if they want to shake things up from the original ending, if they want to shake things up for us in the story, Reeve might die. And I've already said that I don't think we're getting Dirge of Cerberus, and so if Reeve dies, we're definitely not getting Dirge of Cerberus. Reeve dying could still breathe the rest of his life and awareness and whatever he has into CaitSith. And then CaitSith from that point that's the only one. He lives as long as he does. He's on his own. He's CaitSith now, and that's it. That's a possibility. I could see them doing that. I mean, it would make a certain amount of sense. I don't know how likely it is, but I could very easily see them doing that. If he doesn't die and they keep him on the original-ish story, then I think Reeve needs to ask out his assistant, because I sensed a little spark between those two at one point. She clearly cares for his well-being, thinks the world of him. I think he should ask her out. Okay, now to the most important people, and unfortunately the weirdest sorts of predictions. Tifa. Unfortunately, I love Tifa to death. She is my canon relationship with Cloud. I am Team Tifa all the way. The sad thing is that for her own story and presence and character, in OG7, her role, I mean, there is sort of one originally, but at this point in the story, her role is basically just there in relation to Cloud. We've gotten a lot more of who Tifa is and building her presence and everything in this remake Rebirth experience, and her relationship with Aerith and everything that's gone into it, and it's given her a lot more to work with. I've been pleased as hell with how they've handled Tifa so far. But it makes it hard to predict what they're going to do with her going forward, when her job going forward is take care of Cloud. And I kind of think that's what her job is going to be in part 3, because I've been saying all along that Aerith is preparing Tifa to take on the role of keeping Cloud sane. Because Aerith knew that she wasn't going to be around, and so she and Tifa were having these conversations behind the scenes, sometimes involving the others, but mostly between Aerith and Tifa, because Aerith knows Tifa is the key to Cloud, and Cloud is the key to the whole situation, and saving Cloud. And Tifa is what saves Cloud. She's the key to Cloud. So I think most of Tifa's presence and action and everything we're going to get from her in part 3 is mostly going to be around her relationship with Cloud. It is what it is. I mean, I don't know where else they go with her character beyond that. So Cloud, speaking of those two, I've said since we got Tifa's live stream experience, my theory has been that we're not going to get a repeat of almost the exact same damn thing if we revisit Cloud in the live stream from OG7. We'd just be seeing the same stuff from a slightly different perspective. It wouldn't add anything to the story. It wouldn't tell us anything we don't already know, almost, except the original revelation that Cloud was actually a kid from Nibelheim, and his backstory with Zack, which all we get in OG7 at that point is Zack was there, and we finally find out Cloud was there too. He fulfilled his promise and saved Tifa a little bit, and we find out what happened between Cloud and Sephiroth. I think, and I've been saying it since that moment, that it is going to take Ultimate Aerith and Zack and Tifa to bring Cloud back this time. And it's going to bring him all the way back and get him fully prepared to go take on Sephiroth in the end and restore who he is for this goal that Aerith has. Because I think Aerith, her moment in the live stream with Cloud is going to give us the ending of Rebirth. We're gonna see and restore to Cloud's brain what really happened between him and Aerith and Sephiroth, and him crying over her body and depositing her body in the water, and any moments between those two that happened off screen, we're going to get that as Aerith is restoring Cloud's memory of those moments. And that will probably be the last of the 3 to happen. Zack, I think, is going to cover the Nibelheim incident, because Tifa can say, Zack was there and Zack did all the stuff that you were talking about that I saw. It wasn't you. But Zack can give us all of that, plus what happened after they were captured and how they escaped and saving Cloud and dragging him out of there and getting him to Midgar, and Zack, like all of that stuff that Zack went through from his perspective. He is the only one who can fill that in for Cloud. And that's really important for who Cloud is now. Because in OG7, you could get most of that if you took the optional route of revisiting Nibelheim and going down into the Shinra Manor and checking out the pods, then Cloud remembered some of it, and you got some scenes with Zack in the truck, and hey, I'll be a mercenary, that sort of thing. A much more limited version of that than even you got in Crisis Core. And so I think Zack's going to fill that part in and help restore that big chunk of who Cloud is. Tifa, I think, is going to give us more from childhood, or she may be the one to cover the Nibelheim incident itself leading into Zack. And at the very least, Tifa is going to be Cloud's reason to do this. She's going to be his reason to come back to the world and come back to our party, because Cloud, at the very least, young Cloud, teenage Cloud, in Nibelheim, and who went off to Midgar and all the stuff that we saw in OG7, massive crush on Tifa, and clearly still has very, very strong emotions for her. Whatever you think is going on between Cloud and Aerith, there's clearly stuff going on between Cloud and Tifa, and so she is going to need to be there to give him this spur and this drive to come back and reveal the truth and not just wallow in his trauma. So I think Tifa's going to start it, roll into Zack, and then roll into Aerith to bring it all together and restore full Cloud ready to go drive on toward the end of the game. And it's going to be a lot of fun to watch, but God, there's going to be a long bit of exposition there to work through. So, Zack, speaking of, I don't know if Zack is alive in the real world, or the Beagle world, our real world. I don't know if he's alive in that world or not. At the very least, we know Zack woke up at the end of Rebirth in a church filled with flowers, just like Aerith left it. So not in one of those doomed worlds where all the flowers were dead. There was no indication that anything, much less the little reunion flowers, were doing well or surviving in any way, shape, or form, except like the one flower that was coming back right as that Aerith may have been starting to recover. We got that one flower literally dead. That's it. So the church being full of these things may be the indication that we're not in any one of those little pocket doomed worlds. Zack may have made it into the real world, in which case Zack is gonna start trying to find us and figure out what's going on since he supposedly died, and piecing things together. I'm not convinced that's the case though. Zack being in another little pocket world still makes perfect sense, and he's still somewhere Aerith can get to him when she needs him for something, and Zack may be the one to start moving between some of these worlds in the live stream to give us the exposition we need to re-explain in part 3 what's going on with the worlds and all the different things going on there. We don't need that explained to Cloud again. And I don't think Cloud understood it well enough the first time to explain it to other people. Let's be honest. So having Ultimate Aerith start moving Zack around, and Zack is, what is going on? Why do I keep doing this? And stopping and talking to a version of Aerith, or to someone else who can explain it to him maybe a little bit, and he starts getting a glimpse of what's happening here. I think that could be Zack's role. And then that leaves Zack in this place to, hey, in the live stream between the worlds, he's in a perfect place to go hop in and help Cloud when Cloud has his live stream moment. So that's kind of where I'm thinking Zack may come in. So it still gives him a reason to be there. It gives him something to be doing in the meantime, so he's not just sitting on his butt in the church twiddling his thumbs. He has a purpose, which he didn't have, to his knowledge, in Rebirth. That was one of the things he was struggling with. And it gives us the exposition we need as the player to revisit the ideas that we were given here in Rebirth without beating us over the head with it, but also not assuming we remember all the crap Sephiroth told us X dozens of hours of gameplay ago in a different game. So I think that would be a good way of using Zack and keeping him relevant, and then he's there for Cloud. He's also there if we're bringing Zack in back for a final reunion at the end, which is a very good possibility one way or the other. So, Aerith then, Aerith is dead. Spoilers. I think Aerith is going to stay dead. I don't see a route that makes sense to let us play as Aerith again. Her coming back at the end of Rebirth for the final match with Sephiroth made perfect sense. We'd been playing with her the whole game along. We had weapons, abilities, materia, experience playing as her, all the things so that she could step right in and we could use her. But there's no reason we would be playing as Aerith at any given point in the game in all of Part 3, so there doesn't really seem to make sense for her to step in at any given point. Zack stepping in, we played a little bit as Zack at the very beginning, just the idea of playing with him at least. We know we played Cloud as Zack during the Nibelheim memory. And Zack controls very, 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 very similarly to Cloud. So stepping into playing Zack, not a big deal. I didn't see anybody who had a problem playing as Zack. At the very least, everyone was so overhyped and overjoyed at being the option of playing as Zack, nobody gave a damn if they were slightly off in controlling. So I don't think we get Aerith back playable at all in Part 3. Any presence she has, any appearance she has is all going to be Ultimate Aerith, or at the very least, our Aerith on her way to becoming or joining with the Ultimate Aerith version. So we could still get our Aerith not subsumed in the live stream yet, and still figuring out where she is in this whole plan of Ultimate Aeriths. So that's, I think, the most we're going to get from her. I've seen the suggestion that Aerith may ascend to the position of goddess, of Minerva, with the live stream. I can't say it won't happen. I think it's unlikely, but she's half Cetran, so she's half human, half Cetran, so maybe that puts her in a unique role, because that wouldn't have been very common. Her mother was full-blood Cetran, apparently. So I imagine that at some point in history there were half human, half Cetrans, but we obviously don't know of any offhand. And so she could be in a fairly unique position, bridging the gap between the two peoples, the original stewards of the planet, the new stewards of the planet, and able to commune with both. She could ascend to something either literally as the goddess or interpreted that way by us mere mortals on Gaia, and she's like, all right, fine, whatever. So it's possible. It's not outside the realm of possibility. I think it's unlikely, but who knows? My personal hope is that at the end of the story, she and whatever remains of Zack are reunited in the live stream and maybe keep their sense of self, at least for the end of the story, and that they go off to enact Operation Gaia Full of Flowers, live stream full of happiness. That's my hope for those two. So, because I think they make the best coupling for Aerith and for Zack as well. But I kind of think Aerith closed the doors on Cloud, literally and figuratively, but on anything between her and Cloud. I think she closed the doors on that in Rebirth at the very end there. So I don't think there's anything to look forward to there for all the Clarith fans. If there is any form of date in Part 3, which I kind of assume there will be something, I think a good way of subverting expectations would be, so in Rebirth, it was your two primary options would have been Aerith and Tifa. In Remake, your two primary options would have been Aerith and Tifa, and then Barret in Remake and Rebirth, and then now you add Red and Yuffie as options. I don't remember if there was a no relationship option for Remake. I think that may have just been Barret. Like, if you didn't get either of the two women, you got Barret. Now this one, if you didn't get any of the other ones, well, then you got Boys Night Out. That was a bit of a goofy thing, throwaway in there. Well, what if in Part 3, if you don't have a strong enough relationship to get a final moment with Tifa cementing things, and maybe the date scene is under the airship after everybody leaves, who shows up and wants to keep Cloud company? That could be the moment they do it. maybe, whoever shows up early and spends time with Cloud. That would actually be a really great way of doing it without disrupting the story. But if you don't get anybody else, the lowest, the one you actually have to work for by subverting all of your other relationships and not building status with people, the lowest option is now the secret ending is with Aerith coming back and talking to Cloud. And they have their final conversation together about them to the Clarith fans, or to close the door on the Clarith. I think that could be a very interesting way of doing it, because then we still get the option for the date, but Aerith herself wouldn't necessarily be an option, because you're not building a relationship with her anymore. So having her as the lowest value option of, if nobody else, then you get this one. Having that be Aerith, I think would be a really clever way of doing it, and still giving us that possibility and writing that in to give the Clarith fans something. Never know. Okay, other major predictions. We're getting close to the end here, trust me. Gone through all the character stuff. Other major things that I think are going to happen. I've been saying since my first playthrough that I think the weapons are going to evolve from the beluga weapons we got, and they're going to turn into the big ones that we remember from OG7. So we're going to get Ruby and Emerald and whatnot. Otherwise, honestly, what purpose did the big beluga weapons serve in this one? I mean, they're little, junior weapons, diet weapons, whatever you want to call them. What do they do? If they don't evolve into the big ones, what happens to these weapons? Do they just keep swimming around in the live stream, poking around and shooting Whisper and fighting against the Dark Whispers? Like, what do they do? They don't serve a purpose in their current form. And so they're still alive. The two we saw swirl around in big flash of energy to chase off the Dark Whispers, and then they swim off. So those two weapons are still alive and kicking and active. At this point in the story, there is not a need for the big scary weapons. So the big beluga weapons show up as warnings, as, in our case, a way of facilitating communication and understanding by bringing Tifa down into the live stream and showing her what's up. Like, they serve this role, and they pop up in multiple locations around the planet, especially where these downed reactors are, that sort of thing. And so what I think is most likely to happen is the diamond weapon may be up at the crater, and there may be another one, but arguably emerald weapon, last we saw it, is down under Benora, over in the Medial area, which has live stream close to the surface. So we don't really know what happened to the emerald weapon at the end of Crisis Core, when everything sort of went to hell in Benora. Wouldn't put it past them to have it move. I mean, why not? So it may have relocated, and it may be up under the North Crater now. And so if it is, that's how it got there. So we don't have to wonder, wait a second, it was back over there 3 games ago. Obviously, Crisis Core came after OG7, and so the idea of having the Emerald weapon show up in Crisis Core was more of an Easter egg rather than a major canonical revelation, I think. But if they're trying to keep it the canon, they're kind of stuck with it there. So it either is going to emerge there, because the weapons are spotted around the world, or it will have relocated. And I'm kind of inclined to think that the weapons are going to pop up around the world, because they don't all need to be in the North Crater anymore. It was a cool moment at OG7 seeing them all show up, and Diamond clawed his way out, the others flew off, and Ultima weapon kind of screwed with the Highwind and whatnot. But there's not really a need for them all to be right there, and especially if we have one that's not already, for sure, that's already the big armored one, and we have 2 or 3 around the world in the beluga weapon form, then I think it's more likely that the weapons are going to emerge in different spots. We're going to get the Sapphire weapon is the one that was at the Gingaga reactor. The Ultima weapon, the purple one, is the one that we originally saw at Corel. And Emerald weapon's going to show up over the Medial area. Diamond weapon may be in the crater. And Ruby weapon, I think, is going to either show up at the Gold Saucer, or it's going to show up somewhere nearby and go to the Gold Saucer. Because what I would love to see happen, and I've been saying it, I've said it multiple times in all my playthroughs and everything so far, I would love a scene where the Ruby weapon goes after the Gold Saucer. Gold Saucer is a massive suck of Mako energy. It takes a lot to run it. Barret pointed it out when they visited and he went to the haunted hotel and he's like, this is what we're bleeding the planet dry for. What the hell? And it just pisses him off, and you realize just how much energy it takes to keep that place running. It's got multiple reactors cycling on and off to keep the drain and to slow down the desertification of the Corel area. It's having a massive impact on the environment. Well, one of the weapons' job is to show up and stop damaging the planet, etc. So it would make perfect sense for Ruby weapon, or any weapon, but Ruby's the one that's in the desert around the Gold Saucer in OG7. If Ruby weapon shows up and trashes the saucer, not necessarily outright destroys it, but beats the living hell out of it, because then, as I said originally, was that gives a reason why we can't go back to the saucer for a while. It gives a reason, well, even after we get free travel, it gives a reason why the attractions in the Gold Saucer are going to be different. Because who wants to go play all the same games and all the same rides and all the stuff we did in Rebirth? Why would we need to go back and do all that stuff again? Give us new games. Give us snowboarding. Give us all the things, etc. So it gives them a reason to revamp the games that make sense in-game canon. It gives them a reason to delay letting us go there and to introduce some games and then some more games later as they're building new ones and restoring ones as they go, that sort of thing. So there's a lot of good reasons why that works. Plus it gives us an amazing cinematic of the Ruby weapon beating the living crap out of the Gold Saucer. Because come on, that would be awesome. The weapons need to show how big and badass and powerful they are. The thing is, in OG7, what do you see the weapons do? The Sapphire weapon shows up, shoots a laser beam and cuts a big hole in the side of Junon, and then gets his head blown off. Diamond weapon shows up, gets, beaten up by a bunch of humans and a lab rat dog, and then turns around, shot in the chest with a giant cannon from Midgar, and launches a bunch of energy missile projectile things to blow up Midgar. That's it. Ultima weapon knocks around the Highwind at one point. They don't do anything. And looking at it back on it now from a holy crap, we have ridiculously awesome graphics and processing and story abilities now. We better get some frickin' chaos from the weapons. They need to do something. And Ruby weapon taking on the Gold Saucer. Sapphire doing a bit more than just shooting a laser at Junon would be nice. Who knows what the Emerald weapon might pull off? Like getting to see the weapons do something realistic to show how powerful they are. Ruby weapon versus Gold Saucer is easy. It's fairly obvious. It's an obvious target. There's so many reasons why it works well, I think. So I would love to see that. All right, final round of predictions here. I think the reunion will happen. I think the moment will come. I think all of the worlds will be reunited, and we'll get back to one canon story world in the universe. And obviously we're hoping for a good outcome and that it's going to be Aerith's version, not Sephiroth's. But I think the reunion moment has to come at the culmination of the story, and everything's going to be reunited. Meteor's going to come in, Aerith kicks off Holy, all that stuff still sort of happens more or less the way it did originally. Some variation or version of that I think we're going to get, but I think it starts with the reunion actually happening. I don't think we can stop it. I don't think we should be stopping it. I think both Aerith and Sephiroth want it to happen, and therefore it will happen. And it's just going to be a question of whose version of events wins out and becomes the one new canon story. I think that's what we're moving towards. Little things that I think we might see along the way. I would love if we got the chance to actually interact with, or hear from at least, Jenova. Because so far, all the interactions with Jenova has been as a Genovaroth clone, and so speaking as Sephiroth, and we've never gotten Jenova herself, that humanoid entity regathered, all of her reunioned, whatever, back as Jenova in a humanoid form, like the one that we saw briefly in the Nibelheim reactor, and a little bit in Midgar in Remake. We've never heard from Jenova. The closest we've ever heard to hearing from Jenova specifically was in OG7, that one line, the "because you are a puppet," where "because" is misspelled. Literally the only line attributed to Jenova in FF7 lore, I think at all, certainly in OG, but I think at all, that's the only line we hear directly from and attributed to Jenova. So how crazy would it be if we finally get to hear from Jenova directly? I think that would be a really interesting way and a really cool thing to give us at the end of all of this, as a way of capping off the series, something new but still perfectly in keeping with the world. I'm kind of the opinion that Jenova and Sephiroth are gonna part ways a little bit. If they're trying to offer any form of redemption for Sephiroth, and I've heard the argument and people giving us the backstory in Ever Crisis and showing us where and why and some of what's there. I haven't played it. I'm relying on other people's interpretations. So, but the people have been saying that the story they're giving us is trying to explain and give us a reason why. And maybe Sephiroth isn't all as bad as we think, and it's trying to offer a redemption arc for him. If they are, and I could see it, because he's such a popular villain, I could see them trying to give us that in some way, shape, or form. It's going to be hard to do that without ruining Sephiroth. And so, if they want to do that, then I think what's going to happen is Sephiroth and Jenova are going to diverge, and Sephiroth may come to the realization or the conclusion that Jenova has been manipulating him from the moment he found out about her. You go back to the Nibelheim incident, when he is reading about her for the first time and he realizes that's my mom's name, that's all the stuff, and he's reading about it under the Shinra Manor. He starts having those flashes and you see her face, and it's all there, and Sephiroth's world falls down around him. His mind breaks a little bit. It's this huge thing for him, and suddenly he's, oh, I need to go find Mother. I need to start killing everyone. And it's a reversal of his character. Like, he's been this hero, ruthless, but a hero. And again, haven't played Ever Crisis and all the prequel stuff, so maybe there's more badness there. But anyway, from what I've seen at least, it's a pretty abrupt and sudden reversal of most of who we know Sephiroth to be at that point. And so it's a very easy argument to make that Jenova gets in there right there and starts to influence him and screw with his head right away, and has been screwing with him ever since. Especially getting him to the reactor, taking and just long enough to take the head, and then Cloud does his thing and sends Sephiroth into the live stream carrying Jenova's head, that's what allows Sephiroth to live, really, and get past that moment. Is Jenova helps him survive, and so he's in the life stream with her head and the cells, and that's sort of where this whole thing started from for him. And so, if Sephiroth is trying to rule the world and gather the life, and at best maybe go surf the cosmos, and he's got this sort of idealized version of him and Mom going off and starting a new world together, etc. Whereas Jenova's just like, I'm just here to destroy things and then move on to the next place. I don't really give a damn. If those two come to blows, Sephiroth may have this realization that she has been influencing him. Sephiroth strikes me as the kind of person who would not take kindly to realizing he has been under someone else's control this whole time and has been working towards their ends, etc. And so maybe towards the end, and this is wildly theory crafting speculation at this point, what if we get Cloud, Sephiroth, and Zack versus Jenova? Maybe. And one of the things that leads me to this conclusion, honestly, is Loveless. And this is sort of this weird thought process that I had thinking this through. So we know Genesis has always thought there's more to Loveless than anybody else. And Genesis and Sephiroth were really good friends way back in the day. And we know Genesis survived. We got the G version of the Loveless story in Rebirth, which I think is based on Genesis's interpretation, especially of the final act. All this stuff that I covered during the appropriate chapters. They all, in one way or another, set out from the City of Machines. In Loveless, it's Guardia. Well, Midgar is the City of Machines in this storyline. We have three warriors who set out. During Loveless was the first time this really sort of occurred to me with that it could be some relationship between these three warriors and the story. What if one is killed before his, or one is lost before his time, one is killed, one is captured? The whole series, what if it's talking about these three in some interpretation? At the very least, we have legend shall speak of the sacrifice at World's End. If Sephiroth realizes Jenova's been manipulating her the whole time, he helps fight Jenova, and maybe we still get a fight with safer Sephiroth versus our party, because that's, I mean, I think we're gonna get it one way or the other. I think we'll get the safer Sephiroth fight. That's too iconic. The question, though, is what if we get safer Sephiroth before Jenova? Because in the original, you fight Jenova complete, which is just the big bulbous head with the antennas on it. And then after you fight that final Jenova, then safer Sephiroth comes down with his white feathery tentacles, and you fight him, and then Cloud does his mano-a-mano final attack. If they want to try and redeem Sephiroth, then what could happen is we switch those two, fight safer Sephiroth, and then fight Jenova, as Sephiroth has been injured and is reeling from his plans falling apart, and Jenova, they have a conversation, there's a confrontation, there's something, and Sephiroth is like, oh, wait, crap, this is not gonna get me what I wanted. You've been manipulating me this whole time. You know, am I the baddie? Moment, you know. And so Sephiroth, Zack, and Cloud team up, and fighting some version of Jenova. Maybe you get Jenova complete, then safer Sephiroth, and then this final battle sort of thing. Lots of possibilities here. I'm just throwing stuff at the wall because it sounds cool, and so I'm braining it out a little bit. Because we have no frickin' idea. So you beat, and you get this final moment with the three of you. You beat this final version of Jenova. Sephiroth has more or less come to his senses. If they do this, imagine the moment when Sephiroth then starts quoting Loveless at you and says, "Even if the morrow is barren of promises, no promises await. Nothing shall forestall my return to become the dew that quenches the land. To spare the sands, the seas, the skies, I offer thee this silent sacrifice." Sephiroth knows, there's no going back, or maybe he's required to finish this off, and he sets this so now Cloud then delivers the final blow and kills Sephiroth, and this final moment of Sephiroth is, sort of a frickin' Genesis had it right all along with his Loveless BS. Genesis has been quoting Loveless out in this whole damn time they were friends, and it turns out Genesis was right, damn it. Only Sephiroth is the one who sacrifices himself at the end so that he really does dissipate into the life stream to return as the dew and quench the land, sparing the sand and seas and skies, sparing the world from his original plan by sacrificing himself and putting an end to this once and for all. I don't know if that is in any way, shape, or form likely. If they're trying to redeem Sephiroth, that is, I think, one plausible way they could go about it. Giving us this fight, the three of those three together would be a pretty damn cool fight. Starting the game with a Sephiroth intro, playing as Sephiroth, gives you the primer for how to fight with him again for the end of the game, like they kind of did with Zack. It gives you the ability to fight as frickin' Sephiroth, which everybody was stoked about when every moment they got to do that in Rebirth. You get to fight as Zack, which everybody was excited about, and okay, Cloud's there too. We've been playing as him for 3 games now. It would be pretty damn cool. I don't know how people would react to it. I don't know how people would even react to the idea of redeeming Sephiroth. I know I've seen a lot of people pissed off at that idea that could be where they're going with this. I have faith that if whatever route they go with this story, they're going to do a bang up job with it, and I'm going to be thrilled as hell, and I'm going to finish this satisfied with whatever they give us. There may still be lingering questions, there may still be things that I wish I'd seen, but I'm going to finish part 3 with a, oh, damn, yeah, kind of reaction. I have full faith in them at this point. So if they go this route, I could see them doing something like that, because there are an awful lot of signs that point at Loveless being important, and more important now than it has ever been before in FF7 canon. They've built it up so much. It's almost hard for me to believe that it doesn't play some form of role, and this would be a way of doing that. We obviously still don't know what's up with Genesis. He survived sort of the end of Crisis Core and theoretically had his degeneration fixed by the gift of the goddess. So he could still be alive. We could resolve him down in Deep Ground. I know he reappears a little bit at the end of Dirge of Cerberus or something. He doesn't really have a huge role to play anywhere else. So we could be revisiting Genesis at some point as well, but I don't know enough about him to really make any good predictions or what they've done with him at all. So I'm sort of skipping that part. But this would be an interesting way of bringing Genesis in as well, at least for a final moment of final something with revisiting Loveless in the conclusion of the story. Possible. As like I said, I think Dirge and Advent Children are not going to be needed anymore. And if Sephiroth sacrifices himself, diffuses into the life stream for good, Advent Children doesn't happen. If we resolve Deep Ground and Vincent kind of takes care of whatever he needs to do to deal with chaos, and if that's a very easy way they can deal with that and set it up so it doesn't need to happen, we don't need Dirge of Cerberus. And so, there's no Geostigma without Sephiroth. Even if Sephiroth doesn't sacrifice himself, I think the ending of the game will still set things up so that there is no more Sephiroth presence, so there's no more Geostigma, so we don't need Advent Children. They've said Advent Children happened and is a real thing, etc., which happened in the original story and brought us back to Remake, as I said. So we don't lose Advent Children entirely, it doesn't become pointless, but it's not part of the world and the universe going forward. So, last bits. Number one, final ending moment. 500 years in the future. We see little Nanaki cubs running with Daddy Nanaki. I think we still get that. I think we still get a flash forward time frame because it's an iconic moment. It is the ending of the original story. I think we still get that. But instead of them running up and seeing a desolate, overgrown Midgar and no humans in sight, I think what we get is instead we see them interacting with the descendants of today, with humans. I'm not saying specifically Cloud and Tifa's great grandchild, but humans, descendants today. And I think what would be a really cool way of doing it is if those humans far in the future, whatever their current technological status or living in harmony with the life stream, I would think by that point, they are accessing Chadley's Arc Library and they're learning about what the world was like back in the current day and all the things that went through, and they're learning the history of Remake and Rebirth that Chadley has been putting together and that we see at the end of Rebirth after you do the Gilgamesh quest. That would be a really cool way of carrying that forward, is if the people 500 years from now are using that to learn about this story. That would be a great way of capping it off, and I think would be a really good way of finishing things up. Speaking of which, what are we going to call this game? It's a big question. I know I've seen so many people like, what do y'all think it's going to be? I have my theories, but I don't want to say what my theories are. But they're perfectly willing for people in their chat to start spouting theories off. I don't think I've seen one person actively tell us what their theories are going to be. Whether they're a big YouTuber with thousands of views and followers and whatnot, or one of the streamers that I follow that has, 5 to 10 to 50 people in a stream. I can't think of a one that I've actually heard what their thoughts are on what they think that the game's going to be. They've agreed and said, oh, that'd be an interesting one from someone else. But I can't think of anybody who's actively said. And if you are one of the people that I like and you recognize my name and you have expressed your thoughts, I'm sorry, I probably missed it. So I kind of agree that FF7 Reunion would have been the perfect title. It's been addressed ad nauseum that they already used that for Crisis Core. It's not happening again. Okay. The words that I've come up with, obviously, we're sticking with the RE prefix. Reunification or reunited. I think it's in keeping. I think it works. It's a possibility. Restoration. If we are restoring the original FF7 canon events, maybe. I could see that being a good option for that. Reconciliation. That was my leading contender for a while. The two that I think are slightly more likely and it kind of depends on what they're doing with the story, is either reclamation or a little bit hitting on the nose here if they're going with this storyline, redemption. And if the title of the game is FF7 Redemption, I think we can count on them doing something with Sephiroth by the end. I think that's a little too on the nose, though, so I don't think they'll do it. But if that is the title, I think that's what we're getting. So that'll be something to look for. I'm kind of on the fence right now between reclamation and reconciliation. Because reclamation is similar to redemption. It is reclaiming control over the world and fate of Gaia, reclaiming Sephiroth's status as a hero, maybe. A reclamation is, asserting your rights, asserting, your control over the world, asserting your right to exist, asserting your right, a reclamation of history. You are claiming something back. You're saying this is what really happened. This is what really is going on. Also, reclamation is in like an agricultural or a lifey kind of thing, cultivating the land. Reclamation of woodlands for agriculture, things like that. Like there are nature-based interpretations of the word, so it has a lot of different connotations you could apply it to. And if it's claiming back Sephiroth and his status as a hero, it doesn't give that away just by telling us the name. So that's my current leading contender. Anyway, thank you for joining me on this video at the very least, and hopefully some of the other videos that have been part of this story and spoilers series. I brushed over a lot of topics fairly quickly in this video that I explored in depth a little bit more in some of the story videos, chapter by chapter. At the very least, there's a lot of the stuff that I came to now that you can see how my thinking on it evolved over the course of playing back through the game again. And if you're interested in that sort of thing, I encourage you to go back and watch. There's a lot of stuff that I discovered and pointed out in those videos that I really didn't get to here. Mostly, nitty-gritty detail stuff. I tried to cover all the really important stuff for predictions for part 3, really, that would feed into it here. But there's a lot of other good information, in my opinion at least, obviously, in the rest of the series, and there's some good discussion topics, I think. I would love it if you haven't already. Go back, watch the videos, engage in the chat, ask the questions, agree with me, fine, disagree with me, even better. And share with friends, discuss this. I would love to talk to people more about these ideas and any ideas that you have about these topics and your predictions for part 3 especially. None of us knows a damn thing, so what you got? Tell me your thoughts. Tell me what your predictions are. The crazy, the benign, the out there, this is a pretty safe prediction. Whatever you got, let's talk about it. I would love to hear more and engage more with people about this game and where we're going in the future. Thank you for joining me. Obviously, please leave a like on this video, subscribe to my channel just for more content if this is the sort of thing that interests you. I will have more games. You can see what I've done already on the channel, and I will be playing more as I go, now that I'm finally finishing up this Rebirth saga. I have literally played and worked on nothing else except Rebirth since it first dropped, the day it came out. So this is finishing a long saga for me. That I'm recording this towards the end of July. It's been a thing. So I'll be moving on to more games coming up here in the future. So subscribe to the channel if you're interested. Love to have you around. Thank you. Hope everybody's having a great day.